So, this is a Celtic deity, Bel, or Belinos. He was also praised and worshipped here in Gaul. He was known as the receiver of the dead and the lord of the other world. Some say he was equivalent to Apollo. He was the sun god, and that's why he's worshipped on the 1st of May at what's called Beltane. And the card shows people dancing around the fire, and Druids like to celebrate marriages at Beltane, which they do by leaping over the fire, which I've done myself. Beltane is a time for hand fastings and celebration. It's celebrating the life force, love. And it's a beautiful time of year. It's the 1st of May. My birthday is the 8th of May, so I always love those few weeks leading up to May and the time of Bel. He was also called the Fair Shining One, or the Shining God. And we found sort of traces of his worship. 51 known inscriptions to Belinos have been found all over Gaul, and also in Britain, and even in Celtic Iberia, because the Celts were spread out from like northern Spain, Austria, Switzerland, Gaul, Belgium. Some say that the name Bel might be related to Apollo. It's possible. And it's also, there was a big temple to him in what we now call Vienna, Vindobona, which was originally a Celtic town. And Vindobona seems to have been named after Belinos. So that was his city, which is interesting. So he also represents light and this time of sun coming up. Another version was Abellio, and he was the god associated with apple trees, and therefore probably Avalon, which is a name for Glastonbury. So he was also a healing god. We know the cult of Belinus stretched all the way from Italy up to the British Isles. There was a healing sanctuary at Aquileia in Italy on the Adriatic coast, and Apollo was the god of healing. So I think the average Celt Druid-ess doing healing in a temple of Bel anywhere in Europe would have felt they were communing also with the spirit of Apollo. And that's interesting. There's also the word in Spanish, Belino, for henbane, which is a powerful medicine and can produce hallucinogenic effects as well, was named after Bel. So these druids were using medicine for shamanic journeying, but also for healing. So I think as the card for the Ten of Fire, he represents this beautiful time of spring, the energies of hope that are flourishing. Let's go with the Bel force on the planet at the moment. Try and find a way to peace, and to celebrate life. Eros, love. Find your lover, ring your long lost friend. Celebrate your partner, whoever it is, and let's celebrate together the brightness at the heart of being. And let's not get too upset at the darkness of winter, because it has an ending. And it's Bel that triumphantly leads us out of it. Okay, that's Bel. Then we come to our neighbouring card, which is the 4th of Earth. And this is an African god, Da, who is a snake deity and very important in the African religious traditions. And the snake deity in African religions is very, very important everywhere from Ghana, West Africa, down to South Africa. And all the tribes of African indigenous peoples see the snake as a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. In a misreading of certain minds, the snake became the serpent of the Garden of Eden that gave false knowledge to people and caused the fall of man. And Augustine loved that story, because then it means we're all suffering from original sin, we're all damned, so we need the church to redeem us. To an African consciousness, that's bonkers, because we're already redeemed. Here we are on this earth. We made it out of the millions and millions of little sperms that, our father, gave in joy to our mother. We're the one that made it. And so we should celebrate that life force. And that's what they thought the snake was. It represents that incredible life force that won't be defeated. And so in the African religious cults, Da is worshipped in Dahomey culture. It was taken to the Americas by slave cultures who carried on with the worship of Da in the voodoo tradition. And the Fon people of Benin worship Da, the great serpent deity, the cosmic snake, who is the creator of us all. And if you interpret it as the life force, then yes, we're all created by the cosmic snake. Now what's interesting, and this is really mind-blowing, is that archaeologists have discovered a cave in South Africa where there's a serpent, a python serpent, associated with the local tribes. And on the wall of this cave, ancient people had taken a naturally occurring shape pattern in the rocks and then chipped away to make it even more snake-like. And at the head of where the snake's head is, they've buried offerings of sacred stones, sacred arrowheads, sacred, augury stones. And archaeologists tested when did this start, and it started 70,000 years ago. So they've been using that cave for worship. They've been worshipping the snake deity for 70,000 years in that part of Africa. Now this makes Da, because that's the name of this python, one of the oldest known deities on the planet. And, you can read about it. It's in my book where I've given all the details of this. It's in the Sodilo Hills. And it was a sacred site for the San people. And it was a Norwegian archaeological team that got permission by the San medicine men to go in and do the tests and find this out. And when I read about this as a religious studies teacher, I was blown away, because, up until fairly recently, we thought the world began in 4000 BC. If you read the Bible literally, that's when the whole thing begins. And up until about 1700, that's what people thought. Well, hang on, we've got a snake god 70,000 years old, at least, minimum.
And your name is Dr. Darafern.
Oh yeah, I've just seen the connection. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So, yes. So, I think, how do they fit together? Well, we need the earth god doing his snake thing, the primal culture of Africa. We need the kind of amazing creativity of Africa. I mean, that's the cradle of alchemy, and it's the cradle of the Hermetic tradition. And, Judaism, Islam and Christianity were all strongly influenced by African spirituality in Egypt. As I've said in a talk I gave, there's an African Peace Studies group that meets every Wednesday, which people are welcome to attend. And I gave a talk to them that, explains the African dimensions of Judaism, Islam and Christianity. Muhammad was very proud, for instance, to be descended from an Egyptian princess, Hagar, who was the ancestor of Ishmael and the mother of the tribe that he belonged to, of Arabs. Whether it's true genetically, we don't know, but that was their belief, and I don't see why it's not true. That was what was handed down. And we know that Judaism was strongly influenced by Egyptian religion when it was in exile. Moses was learned in all the Egyptian arts, they say. And Jacob himself spent time in Egypt, and so did Joseph. And as I said earlier, Christ was partly educated there. So I think all roads lead to Africa, and that's Da's thing. And then but you know, hey, we want to live and celebrate life and dance around the fire and celebrate May together. And it doesn't matter what our colour is, black, white, you know, yellow, red. We're all children of Dar and Bel. And it's time we got with that programme and joined up harmony. So I think they're auspicious cards to have got. But you know, let's wait for our politicians to catch up and start actually making peace here. The religious auguries are good here, but politicians have got to learn to actualise this. Okay, right, that's me. I'm done there. Any final comments, questions?
I've got quite a few on these tarot cards, you know.
Okay,
I don't talk a lot about politics, as you know.
sure.
There's a periodic table of elements, of religions,
Sure.
instead of elements, I find very interesting. We spoke about this.
Yeah.
But you haven't told me much about your tarot cards yet. You mentioned that these are male gods. No,
Yeah, male gods.
all
Yeah.
male gods
Yes, they are.
instead of female gods.
Yeah,
That's cool because I know the ancient traditions often have a greater reverence for
the female.
the female femininity. So
Yeah,
this is a contrast. That's great. The first thing I want to touch upon is we spoke about Buddhist tarot cards this morning, which I
Sure.
commented were not actually tarot cards.
correct.
I didn't comprehend how they were, but these are genuine tarot cards in the same sense as, say, the Crowley pack, for instance. These follow the same rules and principles, and each
Yeah.
card can be assigned to one of the same
Yes.
numbers and features. So
Yeah.
if I get it right off the top of my head, which I'm not sure I will, I think I had the Black Cat tarot cards, and I had cups, swords, wands, and pentacles. Are they generally the common features?
Yeah, those are the traditional suits
Yeah.
of tarot. I've changed
Is it
them
always
slightly.
wands? Or
Well-
do wands sometimes vary to a different suit as well?
or clubs they would call them.
Sometimes clubs,
But
yeah.
I've changed them just to say,
Yes.
so I've adapted the tarot.
Yeah. Can I guess? Is I think you said Earth? I heard you say.
Yes, yes.
Would that be pentacles?
Yes.
Yes, because I remember pentacles is about material things.
Yeah.
So the Earth.
Yeah.
Well, since I've heard Earth and Fire come out, I'm guessing you have water
Yes.
as a suit. So
Yeah, yeah.
perhaps that
Which is
corresponds. Cups. That's where I was
Yeah,
going
yeah.
next.
Yeah.
Fire. Maybe swords.
Yes. swords,
Okay,
yeah.
and so what I've said: water, fire, earth, and the fourth one, wind,
Yeah, air.
which must be wands or
The
clubs.
wands. Yeah.
Great, yeah. So we're similar.
Working with the invisible realm.
That
yeah.
that all makes sense. Yeah. So no doubt these work. Just
They
the same
work like a
time.
tarot cards. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Great.
it's just a way of you see, one of my jobs and missions is to get men more aware of our own sacredness.
Yes.
So that we don't go killing each other. You know.
I see. So
It's about giving
didactic.
men
It teaches.
self-respect.
Yeah.
It's-
It teaches something new whilst we're using our tarot.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
It's an
I see the
educational
size
tool.
of these two volumes.
It's the
That makes
biggest
sense.
book on
yeah,
the tarot.
I understand
that's
what
been
you're doing
written.
with these tarot. Yeah,
You know, I like
lot
to
of
do
information.
things big. Yeah, yeah.
so I don't know if I'll guess correct. This sign, this auspicious symbol looks familiar. Maybe it's sacred knot?
It is. It's Tibetan Buddhist.
Tibetan.
Tibetan
Must
Buddhist.
be where I
sacred
recognise it from.
knot. Yeah.
You know, I do a lot of Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
the endless knot. Yeah.
And approximately how many different religions are featured
In the tarot.
in
Yeah.
this tarot deck?
Well, I tried to put them all in, and of course, you know, I ran out.
All
of
of the same.
size.
So
Yeah.
do the tarot
So-
deck correspond to your table?
There's a correlation, but not
Oh,
exactly.
of course, you haven't got enough cards for the.
I haven't got enough cards for it. So,
yeah, right.
But I did make sure that there's tarots representing every continent. So there's from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, from Latin America, North America. I've got a good balance between the pagan cultures and the, the other ones. I've got cards for Allah and Yahweh. So I've got Islam, Judaism covered. I've got ancient Greek, Roman, Etruscan, also Zoroastrian, so I've got Ahura Mazda. I've got esoteric stuff covered. I've got Freemasonry. It's got the Great Architect. So I tried to cover all the different bases. I've got the Norse deities and the Celtic Druid deities, also Phoenician, and Central Asian. So the shamanic traditions, Tengri is a very important god. I've also got the Bon deity involved, who is the Lord of Air, and a very interesting deity. So, you know, I've tried to... Oh, and Jesus Christ has got a thing, because he's the Son of God and the third member of the Trinity, so he gets his own card. The Ten of Water, because he likes the element of water. He walks on water and he turns it into wine. So I thought that was appropriate.
Okay, something you said quite surprised me that I didn't think through until you mentioned it. Now, are these depictions and involvement in tarot acceptable by all religions? And you can't please everybody, but for instance, I spoke about Christianity first, is some Christians may or may not like this. In my experience, tarot is very popular in the UK, but it depends what circles you're in.
Sure.
So how would this sit with Christians and perhaps other religions who have certain preferences or laws about depictions of gods in certain ways?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, there are pockets of resistance to the interfaith tradition that I represent. In most religions and philosophical schools, there are people that say, no, ours is the only one. You can only do ours, right? Our guru, our prophet is the best one, and if you do anything else, you're following the devil. So there is always going to be those type of people on the block, sadly, until they manage to go to university and do some proper higher education in religious studies, where you learn to be more tolerant and contextualize these different religions. And if you're really lucky, you might find this on the wall of your academic centre for religious studies, and you might learn them all and hold them more in respect. And at that point, you're more likely to realise the Tarot of the Gods is actually a really good didactic tool for advancing interfaith knowledge.
Yeah.
And, you know, but like every religion's got blood on its hands, it's always persecuted the others, both outside its religion and also within. So you have intra-faith persecutions and burnings and houndings, when that sect or that group is called a heretic. So, for instance, in the Roman Catholic faith in 12th century France, there was a huge Roman Catholic crusade against the Cathars of southwest France, because they believed in reincarnation, they had equality of the sexes, they were totally pacifistic, believed in non-violence, they were vegetarian, and they were more like Jains or Buddhists. And this was a real threat to the official religion of the French state and the king, who depended on taxes, you know, and everyone living in fear and demonising the other. So there was a crusade which went and slaughtered them in southwest France, and that was an intra-Christian battle. So those kind of things have also gone in Islam, between, you know, hardcore Islamic groups calling the other guys dangerous heretics. My table is a scientific tool to try and bring them all into discourse, to learn about each other. And the same with the tarot.
Without attempt to play the devil's advocate, how do you think some of these groups would feel about these drawings?
Well, I hope they're going to love them. Hope they're going to love them, because they were done by a Syrian artist, right?
Okay.
Who's a brilliant young artist who is herself a Syrian Orthodox Christian,
Okay.
living in exile because she was hounded out of Syria by the terrible civil war. She's a victim of inter-religious war between, you know, the hardcore group around Assad, which got backing from Putin, and then was massacring all the Muslims. And in the middle, the Christians got clobbered because they got it from all sides.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do with our tarot is calm everyone down. So we get philosophical societies discoursing instead of clubs attacking each other and calling each other names, you know. So So there we are. And about the Allah card, yes, there's no physical representation of Allah in the card.
Great, yeah,
I haven't got Allah with a long beard or anything. He's the moon.
Cool. No, that's
the moon.
that's very important.
The moon card.
you
Yeah,
know.
no, I'm a Muslim
Yeah,
too. I'm a Sufi.
Absolutely, yeah.
I love my Muslim
it's
brothers.
one of my
know.
weaker areas of study. I much more know Christianity, being from England and a Christian background originally.
Yeah,
Taoism, Buddhism, some Confucianism.
right.
You know,
But your
and even Aztec religion.
your Quranic knowledge is rusty, right?
Well,
You've never read it, have you?
I briefly some
Did,
parts, but I'm very aware of affairs in the world. I think this is one you can't miss about depictions.
Yeah, you're not
so,
allowed
yeah.
to. I mean,
This is what I felt I
It's-
had to
yeah.
ask about.
no,
but
thank
yeah,
you, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, it's. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I think what Mohammed was trying to say is, you can't depict absolute reality.
Yes.
Nobody
Yes,
can
yes,
draw
yes.
absolute reality. If I gave you a crayon and said draw God, I mean you can't do it because God is everything, infinite. You know you can't do it, right? And so that's the metaphysical content, as Fritjof Schuon, one of the great Sufis of the 20th century, would say. That was the point of that prohibition on imagery. But that's the kind of esoteric meaning of it. And of course, like all esoteric truths, it then gets cloaked by exoteric rules.
Yeah.
Which, if you draw a flower, you're going to go to hell. I mean, this is just ridiculous. It's not the point. It misses the point. And in fact, it puts people off Islam. It's not true Islam at all, that kind of fanaticism. It came later for sociological reasons, when people who were promoting Islam Inc. as a military thing to get booty and power and all that, thought it was a good way to create a state of fear for people instead of a state of love and surrender, which is the true meaning of Islam. So I would say my cards are truly, truly Islamic in the best sense of the term. They're about bringing surrender to the absolute through all the various forms that takes in every culture. I mean, Muhammad didn't know about the Druids. He'd never heard of us. He didn't know about the Celts. He didn't know about the Sand People and their snake deity. Had he known, he would have been respectful, because he was a respectful person. And he says in his, in his sayings, seek knowledge, even as far as China, which for him was like the end of the world. So this is seeking knowledge, even as far as China. Talking of which, we're now going to hear from my colleague, who's prepared a short talk about his studies in China and around Chinese religion. So I'm looking forward to this. So let's welcome Kane. Do come and sit here. We'll hear from you. Right, so welcome. This is Kane Alexander, come from the UK, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Thomas. So yes, my name's Kane Alexander. I'm here from England. I will be at the International Institute for Peace Studies and Global Philosophy, working alongside Thomas for a period of time, and I wish to contribute to these videos and podcasts with my research, which I'm doing currently in Wales. So I'm currently with the University of Wales, Bangor, and there I study the philosophy of Carl Jung and Tibetan Buddhism, also some Chinese Buddhism. However, today I'm going to begin by talking about my research from last year, which was with the University of Wales, Trinity St David, a bit further south in Wales in Lampeter. And that is on the intersection of yin-yang and neuroscience. So, just to begin, the philosophy of yin-yang and neuroscience I'm going to mention this only briefly because I want to give a full extended talk about this at another time. But I'm going to start from where I feel it began. And it was actually in the West. Even though we know yin yang, of course, is Chinese, you can't get more Chinese than Taoism. It's really been there from the origins of the earliest society, untraceably. But when you talk about yin yang in neuroscience and the yin yang balance of the brain, this really began in 1970s in the West. And this is because in China, yin yang was a balance between many things in the cosmos, but in terms of the human, I think primarily we think of it in terms of the mind and body duality, with I think the head will be yang and the body will be yin. But when it came to neuroscience, what we tried to do was talk about the brain in isolation, and this is one of the things about reductionism in science. It changes things and it looks at things very differently. So the first models we created dealt with yin yang in some problematic ways. And the first one is that it dealt with yin yang as yin and yang. It talked about them in terms of separation. Talked about the left brain, right brain, as if it isn't one brain. And that was a problem, because when we look at mind-body, I think it's common knowledge that in the East we talk about mind-body as one. And I think it's very important to talk about the brain in the same way. And even though this distinction may seem trivial, there was other reasons why the original models didn't work. So one of the main reasons is we tried to label the left half of the brain West and the right half of the brain East. And this is right back in the beginning. And this doesn't work at all, because as this was created at a time in UK or US, the West generally, where Taoist knowledge was minimal, we were using the cardinal directions incorrectly. Instead of using the cardinal directions in relation to the human, relation to the planet, relation to the cosmos, we tried to use the term West to refer to Westerners and the term East to refer to Chinese people, and this didn't work. So basically there was a lot of problems with the old models. We used the models again for gender discrimination. So as we talk about yin yang as a relationship between males and females, we tried to call half of the brain male, half of the brain female, and this didn't work either. And without going into the details of this, these are the reasons why the models were abandoned, and neuroscience was without a true usable yin yang brain model. And a lot of people want this thing, you know, and it's not necessarily that everybody out there understands this thing deeply, the details, the intricacies, but it's popular. People feel urging for certain symbols and certain philosophies. And you know, just like myself, at the beginning when you first find out about these philosophies, you don't understand them, but you just know you want them. You just know you like them. It feels right. And I think there's really a demand for it out there. And the current model is unacceptable by the scientific community because of multiple errors within it. So in brain science at the moment, people talk about balance of the brain, only the balance of the brain, and that can be scientifically verified as a balance between the two hemispheres as one, but they cannot really talk about yin yang in this context because the errors with the models. And I think it's really important to understand the irony, because the irony was that when the yin-yang models failed and broke down, the neuroscientific community blamed Taoism. It's like yin-yang doesn't work for neuroscience. They didn't understand that yin-yang does work for neuroscience. Their models don't work for neuroscience. They don't work for anything because they were completely false. But this hasn't stopped them being popular amongst the bloggers, because people still want it, whether the model's valid or not. So there were some second models created that only use true, correct neuroscientific terminology, and these were okay, but there was other things that they didn't recognize. They were still using yin yang as two separate things, left brain, right brain. They wasn't talking about the mutual inclusion of elements in neuroscience and the mutual inclusion of elements in yin yang. It had represented yin yang incorrectly and the brain partially correctly. And also in yin yang, everything swaps around, everything inverts. So, you know, so in the same sense that summer becomes winter due to the rotations of the globe, the characteristics of yin yang must change as well. And these weren't included in the former models. The models are being accused by some of the Chinese authors I've been reading as being static, very static. We know yin yang's all about cycles and movement and change, and these weren't really represented in the models. So what I did, well, I was writing about yin yang firstly for my undergraduate dissertation, and I began to include some more rules of yin yang to represent things like the change in hemispheric dominance, the changes in the brain and the mutual inclusion of elements, the way the brain can change due to neuroplasticity. And when it came to my master's thesis, again, I wanted to write in yin yang and brain science, but I'd improved my knowledge by this point and I realized these old models don't work and they were false. And I was in a bit of position where I want to continue my research, I want to continue in this area, I feel it's real and I feel it's valid, but the models are wrong. And due to me training in neuroscience for so long, I knew that it's very important to have scientific validity. I mean, and even not just scientific validity, but just validity generally, not to just make claims of things that we like and that we want to be true, to explain these things methodically. And so I realized I had to abandon the old model. So partway through, I was kind of in that stuck position where I'm like, where do I go next? And I was reading an author called Wang, somebody who I studied under briefly, very briefly when I was in China, at summer school with Peking University and Beijing Foreign Studies University. And I found 6 rules of yin yang. And I read them in English. I'm not going to read them in Chinese today. It's contradiction / opposition, which we call equal and opposite. That's always depicted in all of the yin yang brain models. The second rule, they hasten to mention, which was interdependence. The third rule, mutual inclusion. Fourth rule, interaction. Fifth rule, mutual support. And the sixth rule, transformation, which is the change in dominance. And what I did differently was to take these 6 rules and mix them with the former neuroscientific models. So the former models show the 2 polarities, all the rules of the 2 polarities, and try to label one yin and one yang. I cross those labels out because it should never be a separation, but I keep the polarities. And I take these 6 rules and I mix them with the polarities. And the reason I do this is because then you get a true representation of not only yin yang but also the brain. So I focus it on a relationship, that these 6 rules describe the relationship which constitutes balance. And by doing so, the model is not only valid in terms of Taoism, but is also valid in terms of science. Now, I will explain this in much more detail at a later point, but I feel it's really important to have a usable model out there.